Halloween, everybody. In today's video, I'm going to show you an extreme, like amazingly extreme zombie hand that looks like it is bursting through the nail. The nail looks kind of like dirt or ground. And then it's got all of these bones that are exposed and blood and guts. You can actually see the bones that are inside the arm. It is built up almost like human flesh with layer upon layer. I love it. I hope you guys like it as much as I do. And don't forget to click subscribe to see all my future videos as well. To start with, I'm going to begin with an overlay of brown acrylic going down the nail that is a mix of a few shades. I've got a really dark brown, a chocolate brown, and then just a touch of a lighter kind of a mauve-y tan that I'm going to mix in. You just don't want it to be a single color. You just want it to be a little bit mottled. So after you have this little overlay going over the top of it, you're going to go to the middle of the nail with the tip of your brush, or I'm actually using a silicone tool, and I'm going to push open the area where the zombie hand is going to be bursting through the nail. Fill in that little area with a thin coat of black acrylic just to fill in the color, not necessarily add any thickness. And then on a nail form backing, I'm going to start sculpting all of the pieces of the hand itself. With a bone color acrylic, you can use white if you want it to be bright white. I'm going to be using an off-white just to make it a little more natural looking, and zombies aren't known for their cleanliness, so it feels like bright white bones would be just not quite right. So I'm going to be using this, it's kind of a yellowy tan color. I'm going to make the two straight bones that are for the radius and ulna. Those are the two bones that are in your arm. And I'm going to make it so that they just kind of go parallel right next to each other. And then at the top of them, so this is the part where they are closer, I'm going to sculpt a nice square with rounded corners. That's going to be for the bulk of the palm of the hand. So if you look at your hand, it forms a square. If you ignore your thumb and your fingers, it forms close to a square. So that's what we're making right there. That's the beginning. Now to make the fingers, I'm not going to sculpt those right with that first base. I'm going to be making those all separately. I'm going to start out with the thumb. And if you want to, you can kind of use your own hand to pose and see how different things look to make your different fingers. So for the thumb, that's the first one I did. I did that just with the gray. And now I'm going to be making two fingers that are partially exposed, that have partially exposed bone. So I'm going to do, that's going to be for the index finger and for the pinky. And they're going to be in different poses. And as I said, you can use your hand to make different poses to see how you think you want your zombie hand to be positioned. Or you can see photos on the internet. If you just look up zombie hand, there are so many. And if you want to take it one step further and say you don't like to look at a 2D image and turn it into a 3D design, you can also find zombie hands that are made as lawn ornaments that are at a lot of stores right now. And if you wanted to, you could either look at one, take a video of it, or take some pictures of it, get some ideas. Or, if you need a zombie hand at your house, you could certainly just bring one home and then use that as your inspiration. So I've got my thumb, and then the middle and the ring finger are going to be just this gray color. I didn't want my zombie skin to be solid green, and I want it to be kind of a mix and kind of go from gray to green. So my green isn't quite as strong of acrylic as the gray is, so I was going to use that to tint it later. This gray will be really nice to sculpt with and create the base with. The first phalange I'm going to be gluing on is going to be the thumb. I'm going to glue that in place. I really found it useful to look at my own hand to see kind of the angle that my thumb was at when I was working on this, keeping in mind that you can have a little bit of creative liberty when you're doing a zombie hand because he's not quite as attached as we are, so he can probably move the fingers a little bit differently, a little bit more extremely than us live humans can. After you have the thumb in place, then you can go ahead and attach the other ones. I started to do the thumb and I used nail glue and then secured it with acrylic. For the rest of the fingers, I came to the conclusion that I should just go straight to acrylic. So a little bead of acrylic placed where you want the finger to be, grab the finger, hold it there until it begins to grab, then take a little bit more acrylic, add just a little bit more security to the seam where the finger touches the palm, and then add the next finger going down. And as you're placing them, look at them from the top, from the side, kind of get an idea of, the position of the fingers, because once they get really cured here, they're locked in place and you can't switch them. I wanted my pinky to be up and kind of flared, almost as if this zombie was thinking of drinking a little cup of tea. This is what I always think of when I see a pinky sticking up. And after you have all of those done and they're attached to this point, you can go through and really start bulking up all of the shapes.
To begin with, I'm going to add a little bit more thickness to the bones. So all of these pieces were sculpted on a nail form backing, which means they have roundness and they have shape on one side, or at least a start to that shape on one side. But the other side is not only going to be very flat, it's going to be very shiny. So on all of the pieces, you need to make sure that you add at least a thin layer of acrylic to the other side, the shiny side. And that includes the arm bones. So I'm going to add that extra bone acrylic to those, just as I did to the fingers. As you can see, that little bit of extra acrylic really makes a big difference in the appearance. After you get done making all of your bones have a second layer to them, then you're going to go back to the gray acrylic and start just kind of building up all of the shape of everything. And I'm going to begin with the wrist, or not the wrist, but the base of the palm where it would attach to the wrist. So when I was looking at my zombie hand, I thought it looks better if the wrist is bent slightly forward. And since my palm was sculpted and attached in the beginning to that radius and ulna, it's straight. It's very straight. And I was actually moving my arm and like, you know what, that looks weird when it's straight. So to give it more of that bent forward shape, if you add a bulk of acrylic right at the base of the palm on the back of it, and then you add bulk of acrylic at the front of the palm at the top of it, it will give it a shift. It'll make it look like it is forward, and it will make a big difference. As you are going along and you're doing this process, add details to all of the joints on the fingers. Make sure that you add the little knuckles that are on the back of the palm, the back of the hand. Add all of the details to the palm. I always say palm for the whole thing, but for the actual palm of your hand, the front of your hand. And just keep adding bits and pieces. As you go along, if there's any spots where you want there to be a rip in the skin, if you're like, you know what, this spot here, this skin needs to be torn, then you can take something like a dotting tool or a toothpick and you can just drag it through the partially cured acrylic, make a cut. I did not do any of that. I figured that most of my hand and skin deformity would be just in those two exposed bones, and then I would add a lot of ripped skin, ripped flesh on the arm because I wanted those arm bones to be exposed. So I didn't do any extra tears on like the back of the hand or the palm or any of the fingers that don't have exposed bone. But if you were to, then that would definitely be the way to go about it. Would just be to mess up your acrylic, similar to the way that I did the hole in the nail for where the hand will pop through in the dirt. Same thing, just grab a silicone tool and dig into it. When you are adding all of these details to the hand, obviously look at your own. I will keep saying that because you have a great replica right in front of you. However, if you, like me, are wearing a glove, you won't be able to see like the wrinkles in the palm of your hand. And there are so many little, wrinkles and creases in the palm of your hand. So if you aren't using something else as a reference photo and you do have a glove on your hand, take some pictures of your own hand. Get your hand in kind of a position that you like for your zombie hand and take pictures. When you're taking pictures, do it from the side where your thumb's forward. Try to take a picture from the pinky forward side, directly down on your palm, and then on the back of your hand. Take photos from all of those different angles because you never know what question you might have. And if your hand is covered in a glove and you can't properly see it, you do still need to be able to see something as you are working on this. The hardest part for this particular stage of this design is to round out the fingers. If you wanted to, you could attach a single finger, round it out, attach the next finger, round it out, so that you had a little bit more working space, at least on one side. The reason I didn't do that is because kind of like how I adjusted the position of the hand and the wrist by adding more acrylic to one side in one position and then on the other side in a different place. It's the same with the fingers. If your fingers weren't glued in quite the right location, you could fix their position with how you bulked them with extra acrylic. So let's say your middle finger was actually in the very middle of your hand, very middle of the top. That's not exactly where it goes. It goes just to the side of the middle because your middle finger and your ring finger share that. If that got glued incorrectly, it would be harder to fix it if they were completely finished in place. So it's kind of a whatever works best for you. If it's easier to try to finish them one at a time and just hope the placement is exactly where you want it, or if you want to glue them all, get them all kind of started and then round them out so you can fix things later. Your call. Now on a nail form backing, once again, I'm going to take some red acrylic and just lay it down. And I'm kind of trying to mess it up a little bit with my brush. This particular bit of red blood fascia wasn't my favorite. I just kind of wrapped it around there just to get it started. It doesn't have to be anything too crazy. This is just the beginning. After you have the first piece, then you're going to add a second piece. So red acrylic on the nail form backing, leave it for a while until it really starts to hold its shape, at least partially, pat it out so it's very thin. This red acrylic and red acrylic in general, because it has to be so pigmented, it seems like it takes a little bit longer for it to hold its shape. And I'm not that patient, so I'm going to start picking it up when it wasn't quite completely holding its shape. It was partially holding its shape, and I actually got nice little ripped, gruesome looking edges. And I'm going to be placing all of these bloody bits on my radius and ulna kind of at random. I'm going to focus it in certain areas. I want to make sure that I don't completely cover up that bone. As I said earlier, that bone, I really want it to be visible through the skin. So this zombie flesh fascia, whatever you want to call it, as you're adding it, try to keep it kind of contained to certain areas so that the bone is fully visible in some spots. As I'm adding this, I don't want it to be smooth. I don't want it to tightly wrap around the bone in any specific area. I don't want it to look real. I don't want it to actually have, certain tendons or certain muscles that I'm sculpting in. I'm just kind of placing this down in little bits like shingles so that they kind of stick up and they look partially unattached, like they really should not work to, manipulate the arm and move anything together. So we're going to just keep adding those. Same thing, look at this from all sides, add more red goo wherever you feel like you need to. The color of red I'm using is one of my brighter shades, but it is still kind of seems like all the red acrylics end up looking kind of burgundy. Like there's no really truly bright red. Sometimes it feels that way at least. But I'm going to just keep adding that. I will brighten up certain areas of it with acrylic paint later on. Don't forget to add a little bit of blood, at least around one of the fingers with the exposed bone. Doesn't have to be both of them, but you need a little bit of blood up there. I'm going to keep adding sections of this until I'm happy with it. I'm also going to take this red and I'm going to add a little bit of thickness right along the base of the arm just to give it a little bit more shape. And then using the same gray that I've been using all along, I'm going to sculpt a section of the zombie skin, and I'm going to take and I'm going to rip it up. I'm going to make one side of it really roughly and ripped looking and then actually make a hole in it. And then I'm going to wrap that around the arm in position. This is, you're exposing areas as you're doing this, and you don't want to just sculpt the gray directly on this, because as soon as you set down a bead of acrylic on top of all of that texture that's underneath, the acrylic is going to melt around it and it's going to just cover it up. You're not going to get this wonderful layered gooey look with all this stuff happening. It's going to just blend right over the top of it. So carefully and in pieces, you have to make the zombie's skin and set it down and fill in the gaps. The first piece can obviously be the biggest because there's not as much particularness for how it goes on there. It can be, shifted to one side or the other. But with these smaller ones, you really want to make sure that you're just filling in the spaces that you want filled and that you don't add too much of your zombie skin to cover up all of that work that you did underneath. Once you're happy with the amount of coverage the arm has, go through with some more of the gray acrylic and smooth things out. This is also where you can add a bit more of that bent wrist shape onto your zombie hand by adding a little bit more of a bulk right at the top of the back of the wrist. Blend all of that out. Keep adding, little bits of acrylic here and there. You want to blend all of those different pieces of skin together so that it does look like one continuous piece of skin and not a bunch of patchwork. We're not making Frankenstein here, we're making a zombie. Just keep looking around it, see where anything needs to be. Don't worry about the end of the zombie hand being a little uneven right now. I'm actually going to take and just cut off the extra acrylic with a scissors, because that works really well to cut thin little pieces of acrylic that haven't been cured for all of that long. They'll cut really easy with a manicure scissors. After you've got your zombie done to this stage, you can see how it fits in the hole in the nail. Hopefully it fits perfectly. If not, you may have to adjust something one way or another. Place some clear acrylic into the hole and then place your zombie hand in there. And then just hold it until you can tell that it's gonna stay. Then after your zombie hand is fully attached to the nail, you're going to take more of your gray acrylic and fill in the little gaps that are right along the bottom. Try not to let it flood into the hole completely. If there's any black visible around the outside of the zombie hand within the hole, you want to make sure that that stays visible. So don't just set the bead down and leave it to kind of self-settle to where it wants to go. Tuck it in, keep it contained. After you can look around and it looks, looks like exactly how you want it to look. I'm going to take some shimmery green, it's kind of a mossy green, and I'm going to very thinly brush that along the zombie hand here and there to give it that different skin tone color. So it's got some green, some gray, it's all kind of just blending in. Once you're happy with how that is and you've got a nice, a nice percentage of the hand green versus gray, you're going to take red acrylic paint and add some juiciness to your bloody bits inside the arm. I'm going to add some blood right along that opening, the cut opening in the arms too. Same thing around the fingers, and especially on the back with that one ripped open area. Add plenty of blood to that spot. And just go through, if you did do any places where you dug into the acrylic on, say, the back of the hand, that you're going to make a bloody spot, don't forget to add in the blood there. I'm going to take some diluted black paint and I'm going to be adding just some little line detail all across the entire hand. The knuckles have wrinkles, the back of the hand, if it's a zombie hand, is probably skin on bone, so those, you'll have a little bit of a line between all of the hand bones. And on the front of the hand, just add all of those. Like I said, everybody's got little creases on their palms. Make sure you do a little detailing for those. I also did a spot where I just did a bunch of cross hatches. Make that spot look like it's a little bit scraped or dirty maybe, just imperfect. With brown, I'm going to add just a little bit of an outlining on the finger bones that are exposed. Make them look a little bit more separated. And you can also add a little bit of shading to the inside on the bones, on the radius and ulna, on the arm bones. I'm going to be applying some 3D glaze, which is a satin finish over the top of my, the bloody gooey areas, and then matte top coat over the rest of the arm that would have dry skin and the bones. And that is it. This one is crazy. It's over the top. I absolutely love it. I've done a few other zombie themed videos in the past, and I can put links to all of those in the description box below. There are some that are 3D. There are some that are flat. You can definitely go and check those out, and I will see you all next time. Bye.